All right, we are in Parshat Noach, and we were discussing a few Kabbalistic ideas which we are coming to introduce into this important concept, which we might spend a few weeks now to expand on something known as partsufim. Now, the difference between a partsuf and sfirot are usually individualized. They're not connected one to the next. They have no shaychut. You have chesed, gvur, tiferet, netzach, hod, yisod. Each one is standing on his own. He has no shaychut, no connection, no affiliation one to the next. That's the idea of the sfirot. When that happens, you get what we call the shvirat kelim, the burning, the building, the destruction of the utensil. It was a catastrophe. What happened was that sphira, which is a kli, which is a utensil which holds or, was not strong enough as an individual to hold the orot together. And since they're not strong enough individually to hold the or, they exploded. That's the explosion that happens, vayat tov vavo. And that's considered the catastrophe that occurred when we call the shvirat kelim. All the utensils broke, and as a result of that, the or scattered. The light is the power of the Shekhinah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what scattered from place to place, and there wasn't any room for it to happen at all and to be able to stay together. The only way it is sufficient in order to be able to contain this or all in one shot is we take all these individual spherit and we make a foundation, a formation out of it. They connect one to each other. For those who've seen the pictures, I'll bring pictures maybe next week, is that you have the spherit, but they're all connected one to the next. Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet. It works like a little flow chart. Each one is connected. You have Tiferet in the middle, Dat in between, you have Yosod in between. The idea of netzach and hod, each one works together. When it works as one big team, like one big football team that works together, so then you have a fantastic team that can work together. You're able to work together. The sfirot, the problem was they were working on their own. And once they work on their own, they don't have the koach in order to stay and contain the light of themselves. That's what happened. So the chidush that happened by the breaking of the utensils and now the returning of the utensils is that something known as partsufim, partsuf, which we'll have to explain, is formed. These partsufim are things that were gathered and made into one formation, and now they're able to contain the light inside of it. Classically speaking, when we speak about the shvirat kelim, we're referring to the flood that we have in Parshat Noach. The flood also in Parshat Noach was something that was a shvira, a breaking of the utensils. The Gemara talks about the fact that there was a break in the star formation, but things were broken, things were inaccurate, they were incongruous, they weren't working together, and as a result of that, they were not able to work together, and therefore there was a flood, an overflowing of water. It's no coincidence that that's why the Psukim say over and over again, the reason why the flood happened is loy nichtem gzar dinam ela al hagezel, because they were gazlanim, they were not treating each other properly. What we refer to as chemes or chamas is the Psukim refer to it as chamas, is cruelty, which the Baal Term says is the gematria of Gehenim. Chamas is Gehenim. So it's the same idea, because since they're not treating each other properly, they're like sfirot that are working individual. When each sphere works individually, you can't contain the light by yourself. That's why in Judaism there's a very important idea of Kol Yisrael Ravim Zebazet. We try to work together. We always are working as a formation together and not as an individual. When we're working as one whole, so then we're able to stay alive. That's what keeps us going, and that's what keeps us ticking. Now, this idea of the shvirat kelim, which eventually brings to what we call the tikkun, the fixing of the utensils, and the partsufim, which are their formations. You got it? Individual shvirat, they all broke. Eventually, then the tikkun comes together. When they come together, they fix the kelim, and they stay repaired because they are welded together. Chesed and Gvura work together with Tiferet. Everything works together. And that's how a person is able to rebuild himself. Even though destruction is something not that we look for, but many times destruction is a form of building. Sometimes we break something in order to rebuild. We find this concept many times in the history of Tanakh or the Torah or in general. Like I said, classically, Adam Rishon, he ate from the tree, and from there we start the building process. That's also a certain type of shvira. The Mabul, the Haflaga, what we have in our Parsha Noach, we had the same phenomenon, that people were acting incongruous to each other, not working, they were not able to hold the light, but from there begins the building block. Sometimes we think when we break, it's all over. Hafuch, when you break, that's just the beginning. That's when you're supposed to restart again. That's the perfect time for restarting. By Mitzrayim, we had a very difficult time for 210 years. In Mitzrayim is a shvira, but that was the beginning of the creation of a nation, coming in 5 months in Pesach. The Chet of the Egel, beautiful time, fantastic, Matan Torah, we received everything, and then suddenly an Egel HaZahav comes to break everything and destroy everything. It's a shvira. From there we move on to receiving back the second Luchot, what we are supposed to do. We are in the beginning of Rosh Chodesh now, Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, which is the Levana, which represents the moon, which waxes and wanes, and that's because the moon is a representation of Judaism. We go by the lunar calendar, more or less, and that's because we are believers that things change, and it's okay when things look down, when things look out, it's okay, it's time to reroute, it's time to refix yourself, to go ahead and change everything back to where it was before. You understand? That's the idea of Shvirat HaKelim. The world was created with Shvirat HaKelim. But it's okay, but even though there was a Shvira, a breakage, it's there to be refixed again, it's there to be brought back to the forefront. It's there to be brought back. As the Gemara says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shover olamot umachriv olamot umetaknan. It was chover, but when Hashem created the world, it started by destroying worlds and recreating, destroying and recreating. It came back and forth. What was HaKadosh Baruch Hu making a mistake? What is he? Some Israeli Kabbalah? I don't understand what happened here. What was going on? He couldn't get it right the first time? The answer is no. It was done on purpose in order to put into the DNA of the world, or the DNA of every individual, that you should know, yes, there are times of darkness, there are times of shever, there are things that break, there are times where you might be disappointed, you might be depressed, you might think that it's not there, but the nitzotzot are always there to regenerate. There is always a regeneration that will come back eventually. It will come back and get renewed, and it will get renewed. Okay? It will get renewed. That's the koach of what we learned from the beginning of the from the beginning of the generations. Seder? That's this important klal. It's okay. Okay, I'm going to quote to you now from the Leshem, a Kabbalistic Sefer also. The Leshem is the grandfather of Rav Yoshev in the Sefer Likutim, in the Sefer Deah, excuse me. He says there, it's a beautiful, beautiful Sefer. He brings down a lot of Kabbalistic ideas very clearly, with many ideas behind it. And he says that the idea behind the Shvirat HaMalachim also explains. Have you heard of, it's really a Gemara, it's a Gemara in Chagiga on Daf Yud Gimel, that there were tough Kuf Ayin Dalid generations before the world was created. Anyone ever heard of that? 974 generations before the world was created. What does that mean? I never understood. And how do you remember the number 974? That's hard. Why not 975? Or like, is there a half or is there a decimal point somewhere? Like, where do they get the number 974 from? Isn't that funny? Do you ever think about that? The answer is, Oh, very good. The answer is, Be'emet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make 1,000 generations until Matan Torah. There would be 1,000 generations until we get to Matan Torah. For many reasons, the number 1,000 is a very important number, which I'm not going to get into that right now. But he wanted to make 1,000 generations. But he saw, this is in the Mabit, in the Sefer Beit Elokim, he saw it's not going to go. He saw that 1,000 generations is not going to happen. People are just going to waste away. It's not going to last. So he changed it from 1,000 to 26. Take that on for a discount. I wish the Kabbalah would give me a discount like that, right? It went from 1,000 to 26. 26 generations, that's enough. And even that was only 1,500 years. It wasn't such a, whatever, a little over 2,000 years, but 2448, but I meant till the flood. Anyways, he took, instead of having 1,000 generations, 26 years. So that's how we get the number 974. I got it? 1,000 minus 26 is 974. Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said 26 generations. So from Adam Arishon until Moshe Rabbeinu was 26 generations in which we received the Torah. So what happened to these first 974 generations? Where are they? Who are they? So Al Pi Kabbalah, there's a very deep idea here. Those are remnants, follow this, of the Shvirat HaKelim. In other words, he says over there that the Shvirat that came down and they were broken. because everything was destroyed, and everything was haphazard. There was no rhyme and reason. It was a mess. It was a catastrophe. Kebiyachol, everything was not connected one to the next. Everything was pagum. That's his lashon. There were loy mushlamim. There were neshamot that came into the world. There were spirits or souls that came into the world that were not mushlam, that were not complete. And as a result of that, they ended up causing many dinim and gvurat in the world, and it was very uncomfortable. Therefore, the world was nechrav and build. The world was not able to be destroyed. In other words, the mabul, which we learned it on Parshat Flow, in Parshat Noach, happened a few times. Just it happened in the earlier years. They were haphazard type of neshamas that were around and existed, but were pagum, and it didn't last so well. But he says those have a spillover even nowadays. When you have Rishayim Gmurim, or when you have generations such as the Dor HaFlug or the Dor HaMabul, or can I say some people in the Knesset, or are you going to get mad at me if I say that? Right? Those are spillovers from that 974 generation. He says Esav, and he says those types of people are there as spillover from those generations. That's why it says Vayehi Erev. Why it's Vayi? Why does it say Yehi Erev Yehi Boker? Why does it say Vayehi Erev Yehi Boker? What's the Vava Riboy? So the Gemara actually, the Midrash Rabbah, in our Parsha, Mamish in our Parshiyot over here, the Darshan Vayehi Erev Sheyabor Olamet Umachrivam Ad Shabarat Elu, that he would destroy the worlds and create another one. So there were many worlds, Kebiyachal, or many neshamas that were around that weren't making it at that time, that weren't making it for such a long period of time, that he was able to go ahead and continue on and on and on until Kebiyachal, we got it right. Okay? I'm just showing you that there was apparently spiritual ideas that happened. You should know this is one of the answers that even the Kadmonim already answer for the ever popular famous question that people answer. I like to have a different answer, but this is one of the answers that they say for the ever popular dinosaur question, for the billions of years that the universe and the world has been around. Of course, according to the scientists, how can you prove the fossils? And this, it must be that they've been around for a long period of time. There are a number of different answers. And according to this idea of the 974 neshamas, because Breshit bara Elokim is talking about from the time after the it was only 26 generations. From Adam Rishon until Moshe was 26 generations. But there were 974 generations of, I don't know what it looked like. I can't describe it to you. I don't think anyone describes it. They just say it was a lot of these incomplete neshamas. Like these, I don't want to use the wrong word, but like deformed, autistic, kind of retardation in the neshama. I don't know if I should use those words. I'm not sure what the proper word is, but not mushlam neshamot. There were neshamot that were incomplete, that were around during the night. So it could be that, yes, even from Breshit bara Elokim, there was an extended period of time that was around here. If it was this world, if it was a different world, I can't tell you. But al kopanim, whatever it was, there could be that actually lasted for those billions of years. And those neshamas were taka large. They were very large. And it could be fossils that were very large. And that could be one of the explanations that's behind it. Personally, I enjoy more what the Malbim says in our parsha. That he says in our parsha that the idea is that because the water was boiling hot, it destroyed much of the sediment in the ground. And all the carbon dating, which is based on layers and elements of iron and things like that in the ground, obviously got messed up by the Mabul. Everything that happened in the Mabul got changed that over, meaning the carbon dating from pre-Mabul times is inaccurate. Maybe from the Mabul and onwards it's accurate, but before the Mabul you cannot use carbon dating in order to say. And we had a lot of big giants around here for the first 1,500 years that was around, which makes a lot of sense. Og Melech Bashan was a small guy, according before the Nephilim and the Anakim and all the other things. We gave a share about it once. There were very monsters that were walking this planet over here. There were big things all around, especially there were Bnei Malachim and Bnei Elohim, and there were with the women, all these crazy sized people. So you'll tell me, yeah, but who says they were a billion years around? So the carbon dating is messed up because of the sediment in the ground that was destroyed by the Mabul, which makes so much sense. That's how the Malbim destroys. It says. But I'm just saying, according to this idea, there were 974 generations before, which came from warped neshamot that were not perfected, and as a result of that, that was what we call the Olam HaTov. That's the Shriut HaKelim. That's the breaking of the utensils, until there was a re-tikkun that got fixed up again, which eventually will lead to the building of the Partzufim. Like I said, it's not a bediavad. Oh, what a bummer, it broke. No, this is part of the system. Hashem created the world in a way that, yes, part of the building blocks of nature is by breaking and rebuilding, and that's the way that you're able to go ahead and make a change. So yes, it's a Kabbalistic idea, but you should know there's a lot of meaning behind it. I did not finish, but we started late today, so I have to stop. Seder, but next time, Bli Neder. This will be a half an hour shiur before the Navi shiur. We'll try to make it a little bit more informative, and then next week we'll speak about Partzufim, B'ezrat Hashem. Yeah.